Good evening, everyone. This is Michael Robbins, and we are broadcasting here from the Temple of Silence in Finland, our Ask program. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. I'm substituting here for my wife Tuya, who usually does these programs, and she is out of town right now. So just bear with me as we go along. Now, this is a little departure from what we were going to do. We usually, at this time, deal with the invocation of the souls of nations. Of course, the subject is very relevant. We were going to discuss one of the Middle Eastern countries, the United Arab Emirates. But we are now going to change our approach because of the terrible events during the last couple of days and the also attempted coup in Turkey. We can see that between the slaughter in France by a drug-crazed fanatic who had been radicalized recently, so the story goes. And with the instability shown in Turkey, we can see a symptom of a world process which is now in full expression, and it's not going to go away immediately. This is all going to be part of the developments during the 9 remaining years of the era of the forerunner, when humanity has to make a tremendous choice. Master DK has informed us very well about the consequences. It's very interesting, these two countries in which there is such disturbance at the moment. France is one of the leading countries in the proclamation of liberty, equality, and fraternity. In a way, these are the names of the 3 great lords of liberation in Shambhala. And they are also related to the air signs in astrology: liberty, Aquarius; equality, Libra; fraternity or brotherhood, we have Gemini. So France has been a great seat for the defense of freedoms ever since the French Revolution. Of course, there has been some backtracking, but ideally they are present on the line in supporting the kinds of human values which are at present under attack by the enemies of Western civilization. Western civilization, I would say, for all of its liabilities, is the most advanced civilization at this time in the world. And as we have heard from Master DK, occultism is moving to the West. The ageless wisdom is moving to the West, where it will find its full expression. So we cannot allow the West to succumb to retrogressive values which want to take us back to those intolerant times in the middle of the Piscean era, those times which would not allow for the freedom of the individual, for education, for the rights of women, for the rights of other nations. We cannot go back to that. Now, when it comes to Turkey, it's very interesting. Another seat of a great contention at this time. There is a battle going on between the reformative forces and the forces which reflect a more ancient way of thinking. Now, Ataturk was a great reformer, and Master DK talked about the way in which his particular use of the Shambhala force was very selfless. disinterested, not personal. He may have had a few personal liabilities, said Master DK, but in general, his reformations were in line with Shambhala force. Well, there's been some backtracking there, and there are two great forces at work, I think one representing, in a way, the seventh ray and Uranus, and the other representing the sixth ray. You can decide for yourself which those are. Somehow Turkey is a bridge between Europe and Africa, and the instability there is not desirable at all. Whether one supports this coup or does not, there is a democratically elected government there. At the same time, there are policies being put in place which are more reflective of the old sultanate than they are of the progressive intentions of the great liberator Ataturk. So there's going to be ongoing problems in that area. And it all reflects a world instability at a time when the sixth and seventh rays are in great conflict with each other. The seventh ray is not yet in the clear, so to speak. And all throughout this century, there will be a gradual fading of the sixth ray and the energies of the sign Pisces, as good as they may be in many ways, but we tend to see a recrudescence of some of the worst aspects of that ray and this sign in the latter days. So we can expect this for approximately 100, about 100 years, maybe a little less. By the time we reach the period 2125, it is said the Aquarian age begins in earnest, and the vernal equinox is pointing to the last degree of Aquarius. It moves retrogressively through the signs, so it'll be pointing to the 30th degree, and maybe by that time, after much struggle, humanity and its developing Aquarian civilization will be more in the clear than during these battle-stressed times. So that's a little bit of the background, and we're going to see it constantly. France, for instance, has been hit 3 times in the last year approximately by brutal attacks that don't care whether you're an innocent or involved. It's just an attack against the progressive forces by the retrogressive forces. And we who know something about meditation and occultism and subjective work, we have to give everything we can to invoking the soul of humanity and the soul of every nation, so that those more spiritual forces may at last begin to weaken the strictly conflicted personality forces. Here's a picture which shows some of the recent conflicts, the bombings. It's all a question of hate and separativeness. The second emotional head of the Hydra, the fifth head, is hatred, fear, hatred, and ambition. Hatred. And the second of the mental heads is called pride, separativeness, and cruelty. So we're dealing with the second heads, always the number 2 indicating polarity and the opposites, that the idea that one shall be separate from another, that one shall hate another. This is now working out on the physical plane. The idea is that it must not work out completely on the physical plane. There must not be a World War III on the physical plane. It's already raging on the plane of ideas, it's on the plane of mind, in the plane of emotions, but it must not, as did World War II, it must not work out on the dense physical plane. And at that time, the disciples in the world, apparently, from what Master DK said, failed, and it was not possible for them to stem the tide of the precipitation of those ghastly forces which gave us World War II. This time we cannot fail, or the results can be even more horrific, possibly setting humanity back for redevelopment millions and millions of years, and that would be a great disaster. So looking at the idea of hate, I'll read a few things from The Light of the Soul and a few other references, and we can think about this. I dealt with this last night a bit in the Dissipation of Glamour webinar, but given the continuing conflicts, it is well worth a repetition. This particular sutra, he says, is the reverse of the preceding one, and the true yogi neither feels aversion or desire. Desire is the attraction towards, aversion is the repulsion from. He is balanced between these pairs of opposites because he is harmless, and harmlessness has these qualities of perfect poise, a completed point of view, and divine understanding. These are all related to the sign Libra, which is in the sign of peace, and it has in that balanced position neither an undue attraction or repulsion. Hate, writes Alice Bailey here, and you'll see the Finnish is underneath for those people who are speaking Finnish only. Tuija translated this, and Annalie translated this, wrote this in. So you can read. Hate causes separation, whereas love reveals the unity underlying all forms, the great second-ray soul of our planet. Hate is the result of concentration upon form and of a forgetfulness of that which every form, in more or less degree, reveals. And that is, of course, the love and unity and the light. Hate is the feeling of repulsion, which leads to a withdrawal of the man from the object hated. Now, there is the law of repulse. It's the fourth law of the soul, but it's really an aspect of the law of love. And whatever is repulsed for the sake of spiritual growth is eventually reacquired in the spirit of love wisdom. So, withdrawal of the man from the object hated. Hate is the reverse of brotherhood. And brotherhood is of the monad, and it shows the identicality of all beings who are emanated. Hate is the reverse of brotherhood, and therefore is the breaking of one of the basic laws of the solar system. The great heresy, we're told, is the great heresy of separativeness. It is the one great heresy, and it's based on illusion and the emotion attached to that illusion, which produces the glamour of hatred. Hate negates unity, causes barriers to be built, and produces those causes which lead to crystallization, destruction, and death. Well, at least it has its own end built into it. DK refers to it as the great glamour of hatred, and obviously we don't see who the object really is. Let's say it's a person. We don't understand who that person really is if we hate them, because deep down they have the core of true light, love, and power within them. They are equally with us a being of the one great Logos. It is energy. Hate is energy used to repudiate instead of to synthesize, and therefore runs counter to the law of evolution. So we have these repulsions and hatreds that are working out as explosions and killings and murders of innocents, and it's just getting to be out of control. And then, of course, the danger comes that the kind of control which will be reasserted, almost inevitably it will have its own authoritarian methods going on. Hate is really the result of the sense of personality and of ignorance, plus misapplied desire. Sometimes we think we are the personality, and we're not. The personality is that separative factor within us. It is ignorant of the soul, and the desire body seeks to fulfill the will of the personality, which is not the will of the soul. So it's a triple problem. Says Alice Bailey here, it is almost the culmination of the other three. The culmination of personality, ignorance, and misapplied desire. It was the sense of personality and of extreme ignorance, coupled with desire for personal gain, which produced the hatred of Abel in the heart of Cain. This is this allegorical story. and caused the first murder or the destruction of a brother's form. Well, you know, this is probably not a story that involves one or two human beings here. No, it's probably a planetary story which involves whole groups of people. And it's the problem with Vulcan and Mars, as I discussed the other night. Vulcan must eventually overcome Mars, and of course Vulcain did kill Abel, and what is the story there? It has to do with the spiritual will overcoming the lower desire nature. Anyway, she says, this should be carefully considered, for hate, now this is important for all of us to realize, for hate in some degree, aversion to some extent, is present in every human heart. So the finger points to us and every human heart, that's all-inclusive here. Only, however, when it is entirely overcome by love or by the sense of unity, will death, danger, and fear, those are all Martian factors, pass out of the ken of the human family. The problem is the non-sacred planet Mars and its two satellites, Phobos and Demios, fear and terror and panic. That's what they stand for. And this is affecting the astral body of man and his dense physical instinctual nature. We have to rise into the soul nature and overcome these things. All of this is from The Light of the Soul, pages 136 and 137. This is sort of the idea behind what is working out on the physical plane. There's so many sixth ray people today that are preparing to go out of incarnation. They are souls on the sixth ray, and it is a violently energized ray and very, very, at first connected with Mars, later with Neptune, but we don't have so much of that demonstration of the Neptune connection. Right now it's the violent Mars. And this is ruling everything that is subdiaphragmatic in man. The solar plexus, the sacral, and the base of the spine center, they're all connected with Mars, and it is Mars that has to be overcome by Venus, as Master Moria says, the women are bringing in the new age. And Venus is the planet of love and light and harmony, a deeply, essentially higher sixth ray and ultimately second ray monadic planet. Now, just a few more thoughts. This is what we must have as disciples. This comes from externalization of the hierarchy. Clear thinking, a clear appraisal of causes, and a loving outgoing to all should distinguish all disciples at this time. So we can test ourselves against these requirements. Where this attitude does not exist, there is ever the danger of absorption into the vortex of hatred and separativeness, and the divorcing of the person by this, even if only temporarily, from the vortex of love. So we have the vortex of hate and the vortex of love. I'm kind of remembering a moment in the Star Wars saga, you know, where the evil emperor was trying to get Luke Skywalker to generate hatred within himself, but he was not successful. So if we are swept into the vortex of hatred, this would spell danger and glamour. The very fact that disciples are all so pronouncedly individual intensifies their reactions, good or bad. So he's telling us we have to develop the group consciousness, and of course that is going to come more with the planet Venus, certainly, than with the downside of the planet Mars. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mars is very important for courage and the will to confront the enemy and all that kind of thing, but it can go too far, and Mars, being a non-sacred planet, influencing our becoming a sacred planet, the Earth, has to be kept in its proper place, and the rise of Venus and Libra will make that possible. So let us avoid the vortex of hatred. I'm you know, these stories, but I remember a town called Alice. It was a wonderful kind of a serial, and it was about the conflict of Japan and Australia, and this Japanese commander was basically putting a man to death in the sun. And I think what happened was that the man basically spat at him. And it aroused rage in the commander. And because rage came into his nature, he was so disciplined that he let the man go, because he was not allowed to experience the involuntary rage rising from the subdiaphragmatic centers. So there was, the samurai discipline very much under Mars and Scorpio. One more point here, and this is I think our last little reading. As we are dealing with the problem of glamour and illumination, it might be of value here if I dealt with the particular glamour which I would ask your group to aid in dispelling, and I suppose this applies to all of us, really. I refer here to the glamour of separateness. Working along this line will have a most practical and salutary implications, for none of you, as you will discover, will be able to work effectively on this matter if you feel any sense of separativeness. This separative reaction may express itself as hatred, as an active dislike, or as a voiced criticism, perhaps in some cases, all three. There are forces which you may personally regard as separativeness or as the cause of separation. I would remind you that the favorite views and cherished beliefs of those to whom you are mentally opposed, often under the guise of a strenuous adherence to what you regard as right principles, are to those who hold them equally right. They feel that your views are erroneous, and they regard them as separative in their effect and as the basis of trouble. So, each thinks that he is right and the other guy is wrong. They are in their place as sincere as you are, and as eager for the achievement of the right attitude as you feel yourself to be. This is something often forgotten, and I would remind you of it. So we cannot bring the attitude of separativeness and hatred into the solution of human problems. It has to be solved from a higher point of view, and that is always the way that Libra works. The spirit of peace connected with Libra, it works in that way, trying to find that third and more elevated point which will reconcile the two opposing forces. So these are some things that we should have in our mind when we are thinking about the kind of terrible, really terrible, destructive conditions that are working out now in various countries and really, in many countries. It's been in the United States too. It's been many places of the world where this terrorism based on a narrow idealism is showing itself. The sixth ray, says Master DK, is far more destructive than the first ray. So we have to think about that. Well, okay, so in order to counter this, we need a network of triangles. We need an etheric body on our planet which is connected with the soul. And all the sacred planets have etheric bodies made of triangles. We have squares on our particular planet, so does Mars, interestingly enough, but we are at the point where we are beginning to, here on Earth, bisect the square and produce, esoterically bisect the square and produce a network of triangles. And so we think about that and the triangles we are connected with, and we reinforce them, value them, and feel the love and the wisdom and the light and the will to good flowing through these triangles. We're going to build up this network as much as we can during these 9 years. The triangle is the 3, and the number 9 is the number of the cycle of the third ray. We have a good opportunity to do it, and it's absolutely necessary. So think, as we are invoking the soul of humanity to solve these problems, think of the passage of these higher energies through the triangles in which you are participating, and which will definitely help to solve the situation. Now, we do try to work through basically 5 planetary centers. One day, may it not be too long from now, masters and their disciples will be gathered in each of these 5 planetary centers. That's what Master DK tells us. It's the beginning of the reappearance of the Christ, because when that happens, and when their opinion is, and their wisdom is wisely sought by the governments of the world, that will be the sign that the Christ will be ready to reappear on a great wave of expectation. Different parts of the world have the different planetary centers, and for those of us, most of us, I suppose, who are involved in these schools and programs, it's either New York, London, or Geneva. But also Darjeeling is a possibility, and Tokyo as well, for other students. Each one of those cities has its own rays. I won't go into that too strongly. But Geneva is one of the purest places for this energy to flow through. As a city, it has a Ray 1 soul and a Ray 2 personality, but as a planetary center, it's the pure Ray 2 center, New York Ray 6, and the other 3 centers on the first ray, interestingly enough, but from different aspects. Darjeeling also not functioning as purely as it will, but very powerfully. It's in a way Master Moria's city, and the pure first ray will function there. From the materialistic aspect, it's Tokyo, and from the building aspect, it is more London. More Vulcan in London, you might say, and more Plutonic in Tokyo, where Japan is ruled by Scorpio. So we think about the center that we're working through. You know, if you're there in the United States, it's the Western Hemisphere in the Americas. If you're a member of, well, it's no longer the British Empire, but those countries that used to be part of the British Empire, it is London. And with Geneva, it's Europe and aspects of the USSR. The Far East is Tokyo, and India and the greater part of Asia is Darjeeling. So in a way, tune in on your particular planetary center. Realize that wherever you may be in the world, you are representing it. And the difficulties that we've had just recently are rather focused in the Geneva center. That's the center of peacemaking. I suppose the spirit of peace operates very much through that center. Both France, the United Nations is right there on the border of Switzerland and France, so it's, France will be under Geneva, and for that matter, so will Turkey. So we try to, it's not confined to these 2 countries. This is where the immediate flare-up is, and France is very much under attack, but so is Turkey, and other nations we've seen have suffered greatly in the last number of months by these random fanatical attacks by ignorant, narrowly idealistic people who just don't know any better. It's a very destructive force, but we're going to work through Geneva. We think about Geneva, the great pure second ray representing the spirit of peace that works through Geneva. Here in Geneva, a beautiful picture of this sort of highway of flags leading to the buildings there that house the United Nations. Every nation has its own soul ray and personality ray and its own soul sign and personality sign, and those four energies plus other energies have to work out correctly. And each will then contribute a great gift to humanity. It's not that we want totalitarian homogeneity all over the world. We don't want everybody to be the same. Every nation, every people, every country has its gifts, and we have to learn about these things and promote them esoterically. So, okay, that's some background, and now we reach a point where we will do a little meditation. We begin with our connection to the great Lord, the Lord Maitreya, and we realize how necessary is his reappearance in the Garden of Gethsemane. He saw it far ahead, and he acquiesced to the will of Sanat Kumara and thereby entered the Chohanship, entered the sixth initiation at that point. So all of our work together is under the influence of the head of the hierarchy, the Lord Maitreya, and we say this and mean it. We have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya, be with us. We have to have the kind of love that will heal humanity. Eventually the great second ray will be the soul ray of humanity. It's not yet the case. Still, there's much conflict on that level. But we ask to be loving beings, and we use this mantra. We can say it together. I know, O Lord of life and love, about the need. Touch my heart anew with love, that I too may love and give. And we look out in the world and we visualize where the need is as we think of this mantra where we ask to be touched with love. And we have received the assurance, Master DK tells us, that we have the right to ask, if we truly ask it in the name of the great Lord. So we will, in fact, ask in his name. He for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in his name, and with faith in the response, we'll see it accomplished. So think of the world situation and the desperate plight of so many millions, really, and think about what you would ask in the name of the great Lord, and have faith in the response. There's no question that the new age is coming. It's just a question of the timing and how much we, as disciples, work for that benevolent result. I'm always reminded that the four freedoms are as much of the will of Shambhala as humanity can absorb at this time. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Where groups support those freedoms, the will of Shambhala is being brought forward. And where they oppose those freedoms, the forces of obstruction are at work. Here is the picture showing France and Turkey, the two places where violence is currently occurring to a great extent. This is not the first event in Turkey. There have been a number, and France has experienced 3 very deadly ones in just a year's time. Reformations have to go forward, and in meditation we support those reformations, which is in a way supporting the will of Shambhala, the 3 lords of liberation: liberty, equality, fraternity, and the reformations of Ataturk, who used the Shambhala force with such disinterestedness. So we put ourselves on the side of the Shambhala force and the 4 freedoms. Here, a map of the world with the flags showing, many of them, and we call for the unique gift of each particular nation according to its soul idealism. We want a world in harmony, a world in unity, a world of spiritual diversity. And this means that the quality of these nations from their soul perspective has to shine forth and be appreciated by the other nations as well. Each has its gift. The gift of France along the line of the fifth ray, discovering the soul scientifically, and Pisces, the soul sign. It is a great sign of spiritual receptivity. It will prove the soul. The rays of Turkey are not given, but I'm sure I feel the first ray is there and the fourth ray. And the sign Scorpio is there, and so is Cancer. Scorpio to overcome the lower hydra and to rise above the lower parts of human nature. Transformative. We call for the souls of these nations to emerge and to help put out the fire of hatred, the fire of wrongly idealistic destruction. We seek the approach of harmony, harmony through conflict, which will be growing in humanity, especially following the year 2025. But already it can emerge. May the higher nature of these nations demonstrate and bring to naught the opposing forces which would destroy the good. In fact, may Christ be found in every nation. Christ, Lord Maitreya, his energy, wherever two or more are gathered in his name, throughout the world, in every nation, because it is his energy which will allow the soul of each nation to emerge and subdue the separative personality forces. So throughout every nation, the presence of the Christ, throughout the world, the presence of the head of the hierarchy, the Christ. And if that energy prevails in anticipation of his reappearance, that reappearance will occur sooner. Around the Christ, for his protection and support, and his strengthening of the great avatar of synthesis, a cosmic being, the spirit of peace, an interplanetary being, and the Buddha, the Lord of light and the Lord of wisdom. And may a true peace come to the warring human kingdom, a peace through real spiritual understanding, through understanding the spirit of equilibrium, through the realization of the oneness of the human family, and through the illumination which drives away all glamour and illusion. So may it be. The first great invocation: let the forces of light bring illumination to mankind. Let the spirit of peace be spread abroad. May men of goodwill everywhere meet in a spirit of cooperation. May forgiveness on the part of all men be the keynote at this time. Let power attend the efforts of the great ones. So let it be, and help us to do our part. Through the nations of the world, we have been looking at maybe 90 or 100 of them. We still have half to go. May this spirit of peace flow through these nations, and may the soul emerge in all of them. Through the United Nations in Geneva, the great Second Ray Center, and through the United Nations in New York, the great Sixth Ray Center, we're told that the rays of the Christ, when he appeared, were the second ray soul and the sixth ray personality, albeit a redeemed personality. May the nations of the world express their colorful qualities in harmony with each other, and may the good that is in humanity overcome the lower elemental nature which we are all in the process of redeeming. We will work ahead. Tomorrow, the invocation of money for hierarchical purposes. We will continue to build together as we invoke the higher energies, which must inevitably work out for the welfare of humanity and the overcoming of its tendency towards ignorant conflict. And now, the instrument which will facilitate more than anything else the reappearance of the Christ, that is the great invocation. Well, friends, thank you for being with us. Tuya and I invite you to attend these Ask broadcasts and meditations and webinars 5 days of the week, at least to begin with, and next week we'll start on the AM series again, but tomorrow, Sunday, 5 p.m. GMT, Universal Time, Invocation of Money for hierarchical purposes. And now we will close our work with calling Maitreya Buddha.